There is a price list written down about 2,000 years ago, and it says something strange. If you strike a man in the face with an open hand, you owe him 200 zuz. If you strike the same man on the same face with the back of your hand, you owe him 400. Double. Read that again, because it is not what you expect. The back of the hand does less damage. It is a weaker blow. A slap with the palm hurts more and costs half as much, so the fine is not being calculated on the injury. It is being calculated on the insult. Somebody sat down and decided in writing that humiliating a man is worth exactly twice as much as hurting him. That is the world Jesus was speaking into. Hold on to that number, 400. Now here is the sentence everyone knows. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. The right cheek, not a cheek, the right one. And that detail is doing work that almost every English sermon walks straight past. But before we go anywhere near it, I want to show you a room. It is night. Jesus is under arrest, standing in front of the high priest, and he has just answered a question in a way somebody did not like. And one of the officers standing there hits him in the face. This is the moment. This is the exact moment. If turn the other cheek is a rule, this is where you would see it obeyed. He does not turn it. He answers back. So either Jesus broke his own commandment in the one situation it was made for, or the commandment was never the thing we were told it was. Let's find out which. Before we open a single Greek word, I want to say something out loud, because this verse is not neutral for a lot of people watching. This one has been used as a leash. It has been read aloud in rooms where it had no business being read. Said to a woman who was trying to explain what happened to her in a tone that ended the conversation. Said to a kid who was being taken apart at school every day. Said to somebody being ground down at work by a person who enjoyed it. Turn the other cheek. Meaning, be quiet. Meaning, take it. Meaning, your discomfort is less important than my comfort. If that is where you first heard this verse, then you did not learn a teaching of Jesus. You learned a tool somebody used on you, and it happened to have his name on it. So this video owes you something more careful than a clever reading. Here is what we are actually going to do. We are going to look at what the text says in Greek, and where it differs from the version in Luke, and what the legal world around it looked like. We are going to look at the most famous modern interpretation of this passage, and then we are going to watch serious scholars take that interpretation apart, because they have, and I am not going to hide it from you. And at the end, we are going to be left with something less than the popular version promises, much more than the leash, because the leash version has one problem: it can never solve. The man who said it did not obey it. Start with the sentence before the famous one. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. That is a real quotation. It appears 3 times in the Torah, in Exodus, in Leviticus, in Deuteronomy, and in the modern imagination it stands for everything primitive about ancient religion, brutal, vengeful, the old God, before the nice one showed up. That reading has it backwards. Think about what happens without that law. Someone knocks out your tooth. What do you take? Whatever you can. His tooth, and then his jaw, and then his brother's jaw, and then his village, because you were angry and you had the numbers. That is not a hypothetical. That is how blood feud works everywhere it is left alone. Eye for eye is not a permission slip, it is a ceiling. It says, this far, and no further. The punishment may not exceed the injury. It is one of the oldest attempts in human writing to make violence stop escalating. And the Torah does not stop there. A few books later, there is a law about flogging. A guilty man may be given up to 40 lashes. Not more. And listen to the reason it gives, not lest he be injured. The text says, lest your brother be degraded in your sight. Your brother, the guilty one, the one being punished. The law caps the punishment to protect the dignity of a man who has already been convicted. So when Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, he is not quoting savages, he is quoting a legal tradition that already understood something most of us still don't. That there is a difference between hurting a person and unmaking one, which brings us back to the number. The Mishnah is the written collection of Jewish oral law. And in the tractate dealing with damages, there is a list. It reads almost like a menu. Someone struck another person. Here is what it costs. Slapped him on the cheek, 200 zoos, backhanded him, 400. And then the list keeps going, and this is where it becomes obvious what is being measured. Pulled his ear, 400. Pulled his hair, 400. Spat, and it landed on him, 400. Pulled his cloak off him, 400. Uncovered a woman's head in public, 400. Look at that list. Not one of those is an injury. Nobody bleeds, nobody breaks. Spitting on a man does no damage a rag can't fix in 10 seconds. Pulling off his cloak does not wound him. Every single entry on that list is a way of making a person small in front of other people, and every single one is priced at the top of the scale. The rabbis were not soft on assault. They were specific about something we have gotten vague about. They understood that you can destroy someone without touching anything that heals. Now, the same passage says these amounts are assessed according to the honor of the one who was humiliated, meaning a more prominent man could claim more. And one voice in the text refuses that. Rabbi Akiva says, even the poorest of Jews should be looked upon as though they were sons of noblemen who lost their wealth. Because they are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, same dignity, same price, no sliding scale, hold that too. It matters in about 6 minutes. Now the detail that English flattens. The Greek in Matthew is specific. Dexion siagona, the right cheek. And the verb for the blow is rapize, to slap, to strike with the hand. Here is what makes that odd. Luke has the same saying. Luke chapter 6. And Luke does not say which cheek, he just says the cheek. So Matthew added it, or Luke dropped it. Either way, in Matthew, somebody wanted you to know which side. So, do the thing the text is asking you to do. Sit up, face someone, now hit their right cheek. You can't do it normally, not with your right hand, not with a straight swing. Your palm lands on their left side. To reach the right cheek with your right hand, you have to come across with the back of your hand. The backhand. 400 zoos. And this is where the most influential modern reading of this passage enters. The scholar is Walter Wink. And if you have ever heard a sermon that made this verse feel electric instead of limp, it probably came from him. Whether the preacher said his name or not, Wink's claim is that the backhand was never about damage. In his words, it was not a blow to injure, but to insult, humiliate, degrade. And crucially, it was not administered to an equal, but to an inferior. That is the whole hinge. A backhand is not how you fight a man. It is how you correct one. Master to slave, Roman to Jew, husband to wife, parent to child. It is a gesture that says, you are beneath me, and both people in the room know it. So follow Wink's logic, because it is beautiful, and because we are going to test it hard in a few minutes. You have just been backhanded. Every option you have is bad. Fight back, and you are finished. You are the inferior. You have no standing, and the retaliation will be legal. Do nothing, and you have accepted the message. You are what he said you are. Now, Wink's third option. You turn your head, and you offer the left cheek, and you have just made his gesture impossible. He cannot backhand your left cheek with his right hand. The angle is gone. His nose is in the way, that is Wink's phrase. To hit you again, he has to use his fist, or his open palm. And both of those are how you strike an equal. You have not hit him, you have not run. You have not spoken. And you have taken the one gesture he had for putting you in your place and quietly removed it from his hand. In Wink's reading, the message is, I'm a human being, just like you. I refuse to be humiliated. Then he applies the same logic down the line. Somebody is suing you for your tunic, your inner garment, the shirt against your skin. Wink says, give him your cloak too. Which leaves you standing in a courtroom with nothing on. And in that culture, shame, nakedness fell not on the naked man, but on the one who caused it. So the debtor walks out of court exposed, and the entire room now sees exactly what the credit system does to a human being. Not compliance, not violence, something the powerful man has no move against. The third example is the one that made it into English as an idiom, and almost nobody knows where it came from. Go the extra mile. The Greek verb is angareo. It is not a normal word for asking. It is a loan word, carried into Greek from the Persian imperial courier system, and it means to press someone into public service, to requisition a body. The lexicons render it exactly that way, to press into service. This was ordinary life under occupation. A soldier sees you on the road. He has a pack. Now you have a pack. And here is where I have to stop and be straight with you. The version you will hear almost everywhere, including from Wink, is that Roman military regulation capped this at exactly 1 mile. So a soldier who let you carry his load into a second mile was the one breaking the rules. And you had just handed him a problem. It is a wonderful detail. It makes the verse snap. I could not verify it. The practice is beyond dispute, the impressment is well documented, and the word itself is technical. But the specific claim of a 1 mile legal limit with a penalty attached, I could not trace to a primary source, so I am not going to tell you it as a fact. If you have heard it confidently stated, hold it loosely. Here is what I can verify, and it is heavier anyway. That same verb, angereo, appears one more time in Matthew. Chapter 27. A man from Cyrene named Simon is standing in a crowd, and soldiers press him into service to carry a cross. Same word, same gospel. Jesus taught about being seized on a road and made to carry something. Then he walked a road, and a stranger was seized and made to carry his. If this channel is where you come to have a familiar verse taken apart carefully and put back together honest, there is a membership link below. It funds the reading, the lexicons, the primary texts, the days spent checking a claim before it goes into a script instead of after. And you are going to want to be here for the next part, because everything I have just spent 10 minutes building, there are serious scholars who think it is wrong. Walter Wink's reading has spread further than almost any biblical interpretation of the last 50 years. It has been preached from every kind of pulpit. It shaped how a generation of Christians talks about nonviolence, and it has never gone unchallenged. Kevin Carnahan teaches philosophy and religion at Central Methodist University, and his objection is not that Wink is a bad person or a bad ethicist. His objection is narrower and harder to dodge, that Wink is doing his own reflection and calling it history. Take the cultural scenario, the backhand, the honor code, the naked debtor, the nervous soldier. Carnahan's point is that these contexts are not explicitly in view in the text and don't show up anywhere else in the Gospels. Sit with that for a second because it is a real problem. If Jesus was teaching a precise tactical technique, one that depends entirely on knowing which hand, which angle, which social rank, which specific legal exposure, you would expect that world to surface somewhere else. In a parable, in an argument with the Pharisees, in how the disciples behaved afterward. Somewhere, it doesn't. The whole architecture rests on background information the text never supplies and no other passage confirms, and Carnahan offers alternatives that are, frankly, simpler. Maybe Jesus was saying vengeance belongs to God. Maybe he was saying the age was ending, and none of this was worth defending. Those readings are duller. They are also lighter on assumptions. That is not nothing. That is how this is supposed to work. But the sharpest challenge is aimed at the load-bearing wall. Everything depends on that first word, antistenai. Wink argues it does not mean resist. In general, it means resist violently. In his words, it means to revolt or rebel, to engage in an armed insurrection. If he is right, the verse reads, "Do not violently resist an evil person," which leaves nonviolent resistance not just allowed but commanded. If he is wrong, the verse reads, "Do not resist." Full stop. And the whole third way collapses. So, somebody went and checked. John Barak worked through the verb across the New Testament, Luke, Acts, Ephesians, Timothy, Galatians, Romans, James, 1 Peter. His conclusion: the verb has to do with opposing someone or something in some form or another. But it doesn't ever necessarily connote violence. And then he produces the example that is hard to argue with. Galatians 2. Paul writes that when Peter came to Antioch, Paul opposed him to his face. Same verb, now. Did Paul violently struggle against Peter? Did the apostle to the Gentiles start an armed insurrection in a dining room over table fellowship? Obviously not, he argued with him. Barak checks the standard lexicon and finds no support for a violence-only sense. The word means what it looks like it means, to stand against someone. So the foundation is contested, not demolished, contested. Reasonable scholars still defend Wink's instinct about the culture, but the confident version, the one preached as though it were settled, is not settled. So where does that leave us? Do we throw the whole thing out and go back to be a doormat? No, and here is why. Strip away every claim we could not verify. Delete the 1 mile law. Delete the guaranteed insurrectionist meaning of the verb. Delete the courtroom full of scandalized onlookers. Delete all of it. Look at what is still on the table. Matthew still specifies the right cheek. That word is in the manuscripts. Nobody invented it for a sermon. The Mishnah still prices a backhand at double a slap, and still puts spitting and hair pulling and cloak stripping in the same top bracket. That price list exists. It is written down. And look at Jesus's 3 examples again. A blow to the face that leaves no mark. A lawsuit over clothing. A soldier making you carry his gear. Not one of them is a mugging. Not one is a home invasion. Not one is a threat to your life. All 3 are humiliations. The pattern holds even without Wink. Whatever Jesus was doing in these verses, he chose 3 scenarios that share a specific quality. They are all situations where somebody is trying to define you as less than a person, and where the physical harm is almost beside the point. That is not a theory anyone imposed on the text. That is just what the text has in it. And it means this passage was never a general policy on danger. It is about what you do when someone tries to shrink you. Which finally brings us back to that night, the trial before the high priest. Jesus has been questioned, and he has answered sharply. He tells them he has spoken openly, taught in the synagogue and the temple, said nothing in secret. And then he says, "Why are you asking me? Ask the people who heard me." And an officer standing there hits him in the face. Read what he does next, because most of us have never actually read it. He does not turn his head. He does not go silent. He does not offer the other side. He says, "If what I said is wrong, then testify about the wrong. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me?" That is a question with a hook in it. He is not shouting. He is not swinging. He is doing something more uncomfortable than either. He is putting the burden back on the man who hit him and asking him to justify it out loud, in front of witnesses, on the record. Produce your evidence, or admit what this was. And notice what he is not doing. He is not fighting. He is not fleeing. He is not submitting. If turn the other cheek means passive silence, then Jesus failed his own test in the only moment that ever really counted. But if it means refusing the script, refusing to become either the animal that bites or the object that absorbs, then this is not a violation of the teaching at all. This is the teaching performed by the one who gave it. Stay with me, because there is one more layer under this, and it is older than the Gospels by centuries. Jesus was not inventing the image of the offered cheek. He was quoting somebody. There is a passage in Isaiah, in the songs about a servant of God who suffers, and it says, "I offered my back to those who struck me, and my cheeks to those who tore out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting." Notice the vocabulary: not stabbing, not killing, beard pulling, mocking, spitting. The same category the Mishnah put at 400 zuz. The servant is not describing torture. He is describing degradation, and he is describing it as something he offered, deliberately, with his face uncovered. And there is a line in Lamentations, written out of the wreckage of a destroyed city, that says almost the same thing. Let him offer his cheek to the one who would strike him. So when Jesus says, "Turn the other cheek," his listeners are not hearing a brand new ethic dropped out of the sky. They are hearing a posture they already knew from their own scriptures. The posture of someone who has decided that his dignity is not in the hands of the person hitting him. That changes what kind of sentence this is. It is not a technique. Techniques get invented. This is a stance being handed down, one that already had a history of showing up in the worst rooms Israel had ever been in. And it explains something about the trial that would otherwise be strange. When Jesus stands in front of that officer and refuses both the fist and the flinch, he is not improvising. He is standing in a line of people who had done it before him. One more piece, and it sharpens the middle example. In Exodus, there is a law about lending. If you take a poor man's cloak as security on a loan, you must give it back before the sun goes down. And the reason is spelled out with unusual tenderness for a legal code. It is his only covering. It is his cloak for his body. In what else will he sleep? And then, if he cries out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. The cloak was the one thing the law would not let you hold overnight. Now put that beside Jesus' example. Someone is dragging you into court over your tunic, the inner garment, and Jesus says, give him the cloak as well. The cloak. The one the Torah says he must return to you by sundown. The one God specifically said he would hear you crying about. You are being told to hand over the very thing the law guarantees you cannot lose. And that is not surrender. Look at what it does. It takes a system that is squeezing a man for everything it is legally allowed to take, and it forces that system to accept something it was never allowed to have publicly, voluntarily, in front of everyone. Luke tells the same saying with the garments reversed, as a robbery on a road, rather than a lawsuit, the coat taken first, the shirt offered after. 2 settings, 1 instruction. Whatever they came for, give past it. Now the part I am not willing to leave out. This verse does not say, stay. It does not say that if someone is hurting you at home, God is asking you to keep standing there. Every example Jesus gave is a public humiliation, in front of witnesses, a courtroom, a road, a face-to-face insult with an audience. None of them is a private room with a locked door and a person who is escalating. If you are in danger, leaving is not failing this verse. Leaving is not weak faith. Get out, and let anyone who quotes this at you take it up with the man who asked the officer why he was being struck. This verse also does not say, feel nothing. Jesus was not calm in that room in the sense of being unbothered. He was calm in the sense of being unmoved about who he was. And it does not say there is no such thing as justice. The same tradition that produced this saying produced a legal system with courts, testimony, evidence, and limits on punishment. Asking a man to justify his blow is not the abolition of accountability. It is an appeal to it. What the verse does say is narrower and harder. That when somebody tries to make you small, you have more than 2 options. You do not have to become what they are. And you do not have to become what they say you are. Go back to the price list. $200 for the palm. $400 for the back of the hand. A whole legal culture that could tell the difference between a wound and an erasure and charge double for the erasure. That is the world this sentence was spoken into. A world that already knew being made small was the worst thing you could do to a person. And into that world, Jesus says, right cheek. Whatever else is uncertain, and we have been honest tonight about how much is that much is on the page. He picked the humiliation, not the wound. Then he stood in a room, at night, in front of men who had decided he was nothing. And one of them proved it with his hand, and he did not fight, and he did not fold. He asked a question. Rabbi Akiva said the poorest man in Israel should be treated like a nobleman who lost his fortune because of whose child he was. That is not sentiment. That is a ruling about where value comes from. It does not come from the room. It does not come from the man with the raised hand. It was assigned before either of you walked in. So here is the part that is about you. There is probably a room in your life where you get made small. Maybe it is a person. Maybe it is a family that has a version of you from 20 years ago and will not update it. Maybe it is a job where you have learned the exact shape you have to fold into, and when it happens, you already know your 2 moves. You have rehearsed them both. You go hot the sharp reply, the message you draft and delete, the argument you win in the shower. Or you go blank. You let it land. You tell yourself it wasn't worth it, and something small goes quiet in you, and you carry that quiet home. This verse is not asking you to pick the second one. It is telling you there is a third thing you have never been taught. Where you stay in the room. you do not become cruel, and you also do not agree, where you look at the person who is telling you what you are. And without raising your voice, you make them say it out loud and account for it. That is not weakness, pretending to be virtue. That is the hardest thing in the Sermon on the Mount. So, the Mishnah priced the backhand at double because insult outranked injury. Matthew said, "The right cheek," and the right cheek takes a backhand. The most famous reading of that detail is contested, seriously, by people worth listening to, and what survives the contest is still enough. 3 examples, all humiliations, none of them wounds. Isaiah's servant offered his cheek centuries earlier and did not hide his face, and on the night it counted, the man who taught it did not turn his head. He asked a question no one in that room wanted to answer. The next time somebody tries to tell you what you are, don't take the deal.